Now, on the second day of June 2015, Nigeria's former Deputy Speaker, Emeka Ihedioha, had this to say, and I quote, "The APC was classical in opposition. The members of the party rattled us, put us on our toes, and eventually pushed us out of government. We must retaliate and pay them back. To do this, we need teamwork and we must have character." End of quote. Well, hello and welcome. This is 60 Minutes with me, Angela Ajetomobi. Thank you for joining me on the program today. And so in the aftermath of Nigeria's presidential elections, the losing party, the PDP, People's Democratic Party, is beginning to take stock and re-strategize. How should it? When should it? Why should it re-strategize without a clear leader in the person of Nigeria's former president, Goodluck Jonathan? The question most people are asking is this: can this party stage a political comeback to Nigeria's presidency in Aso Rock? And that's where my host today comes in. A former chairman of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, Lagos chapter, also a member of the Institute's council. He's also the founder and managing director of CMC Connect, a Lagos-based perception management company. So, join me after the break as I count down 60 minutes with Yomi Badejo Okusanya, who's the founder and managing director of CMC Connect. Welcome back. Welcome, Mr. Badejo Okusanya. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Angela. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, the reason I wanted to really have you on this program, because I recall that you had in the past cause to work with one or two political parties here in Nigeria. I don't know whatever happened to that rebranding strategy I thought was going to come up in the course of that work you did. And that was why I thought you would be the best person to talk about this in terms of rebranding a political party after it has lost elections that it obviously thought it was going to win. But before we go into that, I think congratulations are in order. I was reading somewhere about your new partnership. What does that mean for you? I thought, being on the board, the council of the NIPR, the Public Relations Institute, having chaired the Lagos chapter, that was the peak of your career in public relations, but it appears that there's still much more that can happen.
Thank you very much. Yes, definitely there's a lot more that can happen. One of the key drivers we have is to always push the frontier of public relations as a profession.
Yes.
And so we're always seeking new ways of doing it. Affiliation with Boss Marcella, which is arguably not one of the largest public relations networks across the globe.
Yes.
With offices, they have about 90 offices across the world. They're a member of the WPP group. WPP is quoted on the London Stock Exchange.
Okay.
And very significant. And what we thought we could do was, by this marriage, integrate what is happening here in Nigeria
Yes.
with the global stage as far as public relations is concerned. You'll agree with me that we seem to be lagging behind some of our other contemporaries in other related fields.
Yes.
When I talk about advertising, when I talk about marketing, and perhaps even in events,
Yes.
PR seems to be the laggard in it.
Yes.
So what we thought we could do is that we could actually leapfrog the profession or the practice by bringing global standards into it. Even though we know this market very well, the international aspect of the global practices, we can learn from those global practices, and we can use that as a means of also furthering or extending or pushing the frontiers of the profession in Nigeria.
Yes.
So it's a win-win situation. Nigeria is the largest market, sub-Saharan Africa. You can't ignore Nigeria. If you want to play in Africa, you definitely must play in Nigeria.
Yes.
And so they also wanted to play in Nigeria, and we also wanted the global relationship. So
it was mutual. Is this industry suffering from this colonial mentality thing? Do you still find that people want to see a white person with you when you're pitching for jobs? Is that what makes them comfortable?
Really, it is. And the fact that you find out that a lot of the big accounts, they are now controlled. You have what you call the EMEA region in most businesses.
Yes.
That's Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And so the practices or the management of the account are centralized. And so they just give you perhaps instructions or directly, look, we've decided this thing sitting
Yes.
in New York, we've decided sitting in London, and this is how we're going to roll
Go
out
forward,
across
yes.
Africa.
Yes.
So it is very important for you to be part of that whole matrix so that they can include you in what is being done. And so they're a lot more comfortable when they're familiar with you, as against you being just an indigenous organization. They don't know you that well, and the level of confidence may not be as high.
Yes.
Now, that is not to say that indigenous PR consultancies don't thrive. No, that's not true. It depends on where you choose to play. So if you're playing in the big multinationals like Coca-Cola,
Yes.
Accenture, Lafarge, Airtel, MTN, and so on and so forth.
It can be an asset.
It's an asset. Directly to your question, I guess people still pay for the color of skin.
All right, so let's talk about the elections. I haven't seen you since these elections have been lost and won. What was your general overview of the elections, especially concerning the strategy of the two political parties, especially again because you've worked with political parties in the past? What do you think the winning party got right, and what did the losing party get wrong?
One, we had a dominant party, or quote unquote, the ruling party, that had become seriously fragmented. They had become very complacent, and they had this belief that they would rule forever, and they were unable to reinvent themselves. And I'll come to that later. So basically, they didn't have the cohesion they used to have before. They had lost members.
What was the reason for the loss of cohesion?
They didn't have enough opposition to feed on. Really, by the time they had decimated the ranks of
Yes.
the erstwhile parties like AC or CPC, ANPP. Remember, the ANPP was even very strong.
Yes.
We came from PDP, ANPP, AD.
Yes.
So AD had gone into more or less gone into oblivion.
Yes.
ANPP, more or less controlling 7, 8, I think 10 states, had been reduced to controlling maybe 3 or 4 states.
Yes,
So
yes.
the annihilation of even ANPP was almost complete. AD at a point in time, or what was AD, had been reduced to 1 state.
Yes.
So they then didn't find anybody else to eat. So they started eating themselves. I think it's called cannibalism.
Yes.
So they practiced political cannibalism because there wasn't anywhere else to go. They didn't have any opposition. They couldn't think of any other person. So they turned onto themselves, and they started eating themselves. What I call political cannibalism. So PDP was its greatest, had now become its greatest opposition. And that wasn't managed well because there were too many interests at play.
Yes.
And, they had this idea that, oh yeah, we may fight for 2-3 years, but when
it's always a family affair.
Yes, we will come back together because we realized that where we existed, or what made us tick, was if we were all together. So if I lost the election as a gubernatorial candidate,
Yes.
or one of the aspirants, and I lost the primaries to someone else,
Yes.
there's still the possibility of me turning up as a minister.
Yes.
There's still the possibility of being made
a director,
board of the member of a board,
Yes.
or an ambassador.
Yes.
There was just so much spoil to go around.
Yes.
As such, so they were always relying on that mechanism that there was a way they could come back, and so they just kept on extending it.
All right.
It was like you're at the edge of a cliff.
Yes.
I remember when I was a kid, we lived in a 2-story building, and I remember riding my tricycle. And I kept on going to the edge of the stair, and at the last minute,
you roll back.
I would pull back.
Yes.
And I kept on going further and further because I was thinking to myself, I was finding it very exciting. So I'll get to the edge and I'll pull back. I'll get to of course I got it to a distance and I'll pull back. Then I went further and I went further. And then at some point,
You tip over the edge.
Yeah, I tipped over the edge and I went down the stairway with my tricycle behind me. So exactly what happened to PDP.
Yes.
They just kept on doing it. They kept on moving forward and backwards. And really, sometimes they just
They
Chief Robert
imploded.
said. They imploded. And
Okay.
more importantly, they had a very badly managed campaign.
Now, that would be your second point. You talked about a dominant ruling party. The second point would be a bad campaign. So what would you say are the elements of a bad campaign? What is a good campaign? I guess conversely, asking that then.
They didn't have a central message.
What do you mean?
The central-
I thought the central message was he has achieved. They showed us trains and things he was supposedly doing.
Well, I mean,
Isn't that what an incumbent puts forward to say, these are my achievements, vote for me again?
Let me take it back a bit.
Yes.
Really, you're saying something, and it's one thing to say something, it's another thing to be what people want to hear, what resonates. During that entire campaign, I heard things like, oh, the reason why people don't appreciate Jonathan is because they don't know all the good that he has
Work
done.
he's
All
done.
the good work he's done,
Yes.
and so on and so forth. And one day I was in Abuja and I was speaking to someone, and at a junction, I counted 7 billboards. Some of them stills,
Yes.
some of them electronic.
Yes, rolling.
Rolling billboards
Yes.
talking about the achievements of Jonathan at one junction. And I said to them that, look at it, this one junction
Yes.
has 7 billboards. When you drive into, you drove into Abuja,
Yes.
all the way from the airport into the city, every lamppost had a Jonathan
Message. Yes.
So, and I said to them, I don't understand what you're talking about. They had the transformation agenda on Nigeria group, and they had been campaigning at least a year, if not a year and a half, before opposition started. How come opposition caught up with them and outran them? Clearly, what was that? They were not speaking the language of the people. Let me just say that
Yes.
quickly. We did a survey, and we realized our survey on leadership in Nigeria in my company, and in preparation for a presentation we're taking, and we found out that Nigerians, what they said they desired most was a strong and courageous leader.
A strong and courageous
bold,
leader.
in fact, not courageous, a strong and bold leader.
In the mold of an Obasanjo, for
Yes.
instance.
So Obasanjo could get it wrong 100 times, but they'll still vote for
That
him
was
because-
what they wanted.
Yes, because they felt that he was decisive. He would do what he...
Even if he got it wrong, he did
Yes,
something.
He did something. Rather than somebody they considered a prevaricating president or a dithering president who never seemed to be able to make up his own mind. And when he said one thing, his body language said the other. Oh, look, I'm not interested in the governor's forum election.
Yes.
And yet you recognize the group that scored
Was
the
less,
least.
yes.
You know, and there was so many of these things, and then this thing taking us on this rigmarole of you haven't decided whether you're
going to
run,
contest or not.
you're
And
not.
then
And
we
it
saw
was
all this
yeah.
activity going
and
on.
there was all this charade that was there. Many reasons why they lost. They were also not, apart from not reading the mind of the people,
Yes.
they were not in tune with the numbers of the game.
The numbers of the game.
Yeah.
Before you go into the numbers, something popped into my head. Do you remember Jonathan's campaign in 2011? How could he have lost all that goodwill?
Yeah, good question.
For me, the point at which I'm still stumped, people were not coerced in 2011. People took it upon themselves to want to vote for this man to come. You didn't need convincing. So why was all that goodwill? Why didn't it count for anything
Again.
today?
You see, he had a message in 2011. And what was that message? He said, a breath of fresh air. What a lot of people thought about was, guess what? This is not an establishment person. And don't forget that he was coming out on the back of what happened, the aftermath of
Yar'Adua's death.
And
Yes.
people felt that he was the underdog. And all of us like underdogs.
Yes.
So he caught that picture. And then he told us a story about him not having shoes.
Yes.
And that connected. Remember, again, I said
Connecting.
Connect. So he connected. He said, oh, this guy is one of us.
Yes.
So he's bound to see things from our point of view. He's not an establishment person.
Yes.
He's not an Obasanjo that has been there all this while. He's not a
Yes.
Yar'Adua that has been there all this while. So I'm coming in with a breath of fresh air. I will touch you at the various points of your needs, so to speak. And then who was his opponent?
Yes.
We had Nuhu Ribadu, who, despite all what he had done at the EFCC, you can't equate that to the office of presidency.
Yes.
He wasn't charismatic. He had been away from the country for a while. Even before he left, he hadn't become a commissioner.
Yes.
He hadn't gone to Kuru. He hadn't taken some courses. So we didn't think he was quite ready.
Yes.
The other opponent was, of course, our president of today. And now, what was the problem with our president of today? He was looked upon as being a sectional president.
His party was a sectional party,
yes, his party
allegedly.
didn't have the national outlook. They didn't have the national platform, and so on and so forth.
I want to take you back now to the numbers. When you say that the PDP didn't consider the numbers, I'm thinking now in terms of what each region, the numbers each region will bring to the table. Perhaps you will be thinking about the Southwest, that the Southwest was ignored. But, you know, people think, and myself included, that they had 6 weeks. And in that 6 weeks, you can't say that President Jonathan didn't come to the Southwest. He did. Almost every weekend he was here. So how did they not know the numbers? They obviously knew the numbers, was why they were coming here in the last 6 weeks.
The numbers were in the north, not so much in the southeast, not so much in the southwest. Yes, southwest had numbers, south and southeast. East.
Yes.
So what had been done is that you looked at the numbers in the north. If you remember that last election, even though Buhari wasn't popular and so on, he garnered 12 million votes.
Yes.
Without having a national platform. He garnered 12 million votes, which came largely from the north. The real battleground was in the north. But the kind of strategy that they were deploying,
that's the PDP, yes,
was addressing more of the south, southeast and south-south.
Ignoring the north.
Well, I won't say completely ignoring, but there wasn't anything that they were saying in the north that resonated so much with the north.
What about the Almajiri schools and stuff like that?
Almajiri schools, it's a populist move, but how does it change the numbers? Because there were other factors that came into play here. And maybe I begin to talk about that. The election was won on 3 platforms.
Right.
Corruption, insurgency, insecurity, and the economy.
Yes.
Now, where you had the largest votes was where they were suffering
from the insurgency.
From the insurgency. They felt they were on the front line of the insurgency. So what could you do to say? So they are the ones that lost 200 children. They are the ones that were being massacred every day. They were the ones that the bombs were going off in their homesteads every time.
Yes.
They were the ones that were suffering from the issues of the Fulani cattle herdsmen,
yes.
the Fulani herdsmen. So they faced it. When you have a situation where you lost 200 children were kidnapped, and the first reaction of the government was that, oh, it's a ruse. It's just our enemies that are
using this against us. Yes.
When you have a situation whereby there didn't seem to be any grip on the war against insurgency, it took the president almost the election time for him to go and identify with the people in Borno State.
What about the fact, the reason that it could have been a security concern?
Oh, come on now. The American president goes to Iraq, goes to Afghanistan.
Turns up at breakfast,
it's just important. It's just important. You know, I never forget when George W. Bush, he was in that classroom, and he was, or immediately after the 911, he says, "We will get you."
And everyone felt confidence in those words.
It turned around it turned it around in the sense that immediately, if you remember, the Americans started bringing out their flags, and they started, it didn't give them room to go into despair, because there was leadership. Strong, remember what I said? Strong and bold leadership. So they saw it even in George W. Bush. And we've seen a lot of that. Even Holland, I think that's the American, the French Prime Minister. There was a killing in the Charles Hebdo, and he got there. There's a bomb in Boston. Obama was there the next day, and I can count as many as possible. I mean, the president wasn't present, so he wasn't able to address the issues of the North.
And that's where the numbers were.
Okay,
we'll take our first break now. When we come back, I want us to talk about why APC won, and if there is room for the PDP to come back. Some people say the PDP is dead and buried. So join us again after the break.
It is difficult to respond to that question.
Angela, that's a great question.
Great question, Angela. Angela, that is a very great question. That's a great question.
Okay, that's a great question.
Yeah, very good question.
That's a good question.
This is an interesting question you put. 60 Minutes with Angela
Again, answers to every question you always wanted to ask.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, it's 60 Minutes with me, Angela Ajitumobi. On my hot seat today, Yomi Badejo Okusanya, founder and managing director of CMC Connect, a Lagos-based perception management company. So, Mr. Badejo, why did the APC win?
Well, straight off, one, the APC were a coalition of various interest groups who felt that, of course, they needed to take this away. They based their campaign, as I said, on three major things.
Yes.
One was anti-corruption, two was the security challenge, and three was the economy. And what they first did was to form that coalition because they realized the fact that they couldn't do it alone. CPC couldn't walk it alone, ACN couldn't walk it alone, and perhaps what you call the new PDP couldn't walk it alone. So they all came, they aggregated strength.
Yes.
Now, they needed a man that personified at least two or three of those things. If you remember that President Buhari had said he wasn't running again.
Yes.
And then there was a lot of shuttling with that Ashwaju was making to Kaduna at one point in time when General Buhari, I think he lost someone, part of his house was gutted by fire, I think his convoy was shot at or something.
Yeah.
He kept on going
Visiting,
there
yes.
they realized that they needed somebody who represented at least two, who had a strong representation of two or three of those issues. And where are the numbers? The numbers are in the north. And they felt that they needed someone who had some cult-like following in the north. So there were other contenders. There were Atiku, there were Tambowa who was thinking about it, there was Rabiu Kwakwa, so on, and so many of the other people. But they just couldn't match the popularity and the acceptance of General Buhari.
Yes.
The second thing they did was they got the message right. The message was spot on.
Change. Was that message significant? Because I'm thinking now, in the light of the PDP's assertion that they would rule for at least 60 years,
Yes.
you think that change resonated with people because of the thought that, can you imagine PDP for another 60
Oh,
years?
yes, definitely. People were tired. People were tired. People were, you know, people were, they didn't know what else
To
do.
do.
People had put up their hands, you know, in a helpless gesture. So they needed change. They needed change in the judiciary. They needed change in the legislature. They needed change in the governance. They just needed change.
Yes.
Even people who themselves were pro-corrupt, they felt that this corruption was even too much. I mean, every day we were regaled with stories of people, jets, this. I mean, it looked like we just couldn't believe it.
Yes.
Our country had almost become a banana republic. I remember I went for a meeting at the Transcorp Hilton, and you can accuse me and say, oh, look at the bourgeois, see them talking. But I went for a meeting on the 10th floor of National at the Hilton, Transcorp Hilton, and I saw this gentleman walking, wearing bathroom slippers, with some lady hanging on to him. And, you know, for the life of me, I actually thought that he had made a mistake, and I was wondering somebody was going to ask him who was he looking for.
Yes.
But I saw everybody, well, at least the hotel staff, you know, morning staff,
fawning over him.
and all that, you know. So I did ask, who is this guy? So he's a militant, and he's been on the 10th floor for months,
Living there.
living there. So some of us were yearning, you know what I mean, that a lot of this resonated with Nigerians, that look, we needed change.
Even though you say people needed change, people were skeptical about this change because of the persons involved in this merger. I was one of those who thought, can these people subsume their egos and work together? Don't forget, Senior Special Assistant to President Jonathan, Donyo Kukwe, had said this merger won't even see
Part of the
2014.
complacency. I think Nigerians just said, look, anything but this,
Yes.
guys. And the more they were doing it, the more bungling. You know, there were things that were being done that...
Yes.
they
A lot
were
of gaffes.
Yeah, there were a lot of gaffes. And that didn't help their case.
Yes.
So even people who wanted to support,
Yes.
or who felt they were traditionally PDP and all that, or they were pro, they were saying, look, I'll take anything but Jonathan.
Yes.
And then, unfortunately, again, the presidential candidate of ABC personified two things out of the three things that were the critical issues of the day.
What were the two things? Anti-corruption?
Anti-corruption. He was known to be anti-corrupt. I mean, that was, even his most strident opponents
Yes.
accepted that he was not a corrupt person.
Yes.
Secondly, they felt that as a military man, he would be better positioned to deal with the issues of the insecurity that was going on. The economy, he may not have scored big,
Yes.
but, And then, fortunately for people, some of the APC states that were held up, they seem to be working, starting from Lagos,
Yes.
and our good friend BRF,
Yes.
and going to Ogun, and a few of the other states.
Yes.
Say what you are about Rivers, Amici had done certain thing in there, and so they had those states that you could actually kind of look up and say, look, okay, why don't we give these guys a try?
Chance? Yes.
Then finally they worked their numbers. They truly worked their numbers. They were scientific and they were very strategic. The core was their messaging, which was change.
Yes.
And that's what they sold to a lot of people.
Some people are expressing doubts that this partnership will last. Now that Buhari is the president, he's his own man. We have seen that he will remain his own man. And once you become president and you realize the powers that you have, you're no longer the president of the party. You are the president of Nigerians. Are you hopeful, though, that the relationship between Asiwaju and Buhari will sustain?
I'm sure it will. I'm not unduly worried about the challenges they're having now. It's normal. Let's put it like this. It's like two people who are newly married.
Yes.
No matter how long they've dated for. Now staying in the same house, because in those days when you are courting,
Yes.
If the boy upsets the girl or vice versa, they say,
You
look,
go
I'm going
home.
to stay in my house,
Yes.
and then they don't see for 1 week
Yes.
or 2 weeks, then they can say, look, I can't live without you, and they make up. But then you find out there's nowhere you can go. So the fact that there are challenges in the oiling of the relationship is not strange.
Yes.
It happens everywhere, especially in the kind of politics we play. So I think they'll find their rhythm, just
Yes.
like they did find their rhythm after the presidential primaries. Everybody was expecting, Atiku will leave, Kwakanso will be upset, but they found their rhythm. And I think what is ahead of them is bigger
Yes.
than what they can be fighting for. So at some point in time, I imagine that there's going to be some settlement.
And what would you say about the role of Asiwaju? How will history judge him? Going into this election, when the merger first happened, I thought he would be a bit of an albatross, especially with the stance of Buhari, people thinking the anti-corruption stance, the integrity stance. On all those grounds, I thought he didn't need Asiwaju on his team because some people vilified Asiwaju. So how do you think going forward now with this victory, people now attesting to the strategies that Asiwaju brought to bear on this, how will history judge him?
You were discussing before the program that you read a piece that I did a while back,
Yes.
Asiwaju, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, asset or liability.
Yes.
I think that Asiwaju, and what am I about to say first? It may sound blasphemous to a Yoruba man. I think that what Awolowo could not achieve, Asiwaju has achieved it.
Some people will hate you for that.
Yes, they'll think it's blasphemous. But I say it with all sense of responsibility.
Why?
In the sense that the only reason why Nigeria is not what it is, or what it should be,
Yes.
was that someone like Awolowo never had the opportunity to rule this country. And Awolowo was a statesman, but not a politician. So there were certain things he couldn't do, or he didn't do, or he failed to do. So it was not surprising his impact could only be limited to the Western region, of which we are still benefiting today. Let me give you an example. Maybe you don't remember. Who was Chief Obafemi Awolowo's running mate in 1979 election? A man called Chief Philip Umeadi. In a country that is half Muslim, you choose two Christian president and vice president,
Yes.
and both of them are from the south. Hey, were you surprised he lost?
That shows he's not a politician.
He's not a politician. That shows he's not a politician. He was a commissioner for finance during the Civil War. And some of the strategies he engaged helped to end the Civil War, quote and unquote.
Yes.
But the same strategy that he engaged is what alienated him from the Igbos until he died, and even till today. But Asiwaju was able to do that handshake. Look at it. As a Southwest has never been able to shake across the Niger, either up or down. It has never happened. Asiwaju was the first person who was able to bring that about. that there's that shake across the Niger. So I think he's a formidable person. I think he's a great political strategist. I think that history will judge him kindly in certain areas, especially in bringing opposition. Without the likes of Asiwaju, I don't know what this country would have been. PDP would have overrun Nigeria. I don't know what would have happened. I don't know where it would have been. So for that, we need to give him a lot of credit. And I believe his name, he deserves for his name to be in the neon lights, political neon lights, along the likes of the Awolowos, Nnamdi Azikiwe's, and so on and so on. Having said that, I think that he also has to manage it well.
Do you think he needs to step back a little bit from the limelight as Buhari assumes the presidency?
If care is not taken, it can upset the apple cart. One person's desire or one person's ambition or thinking may have a profound effect on the entire thing. Look at the greatest issue that is being talked about right now, the leadership
of the House of Reps
Assembly.
and the Senate.
The center of it is what Asiwaju wants.
Yes.
And so the first major disagreement that APC is having is based on what he wants and what he doesn't want.
Should one begrudge him what he wants? After all, he has said he's a hunter of talents, and we've seen the work that some of the talents that he's brought up have achieved. So if he says, you know, I favor these people to lead the National Assembly, why not, if not?
Except the fact that, no doubt, and I even respect him and regard him for that.
Yes.
You know, and I would say that on many dimensions, including this present governor,
Yes.
the new governor of Lagos State. You know, a lot of people did vote thinking that, look, Asiwaju has a way of picking people who can do the work.
Yes.
And, you know, even though this gentleman may not have come across clearly
Yes.
like that, but, you know, he may just be a great worker who doesn't talk as much,
Yes.
you know, so there's that possibility. But let's go back to this. Politics is about give and take. And you may say that I'm naive in politics, I'm just a communication person, but when you look at it in the sense that a lot of people came together to produce the win that we had, not one person could have done it. Do those entities that formed the group, should they be entitled to some reward of their labor, quote and unquote?
Yes.
I would say yes. When you look at it like this, that CPC, or what was CPC, has produced the president.
Yes.
What was ACN
Has produced the vice
president. The other groups that are in the party, should they be entitled to something also, so that there's some form of equity in what we do? I would say yes. So to that extent, that in politics, at times, we have to submerge our own interests in the overall interests of the group. I hope that they get out of this. I think they will get out of this one way or the other, because really what is ahead of them is much bigger.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see how they get out of it.
Join us again after the break. So what is 60 Minutes with Angela all about? It's not an interview. I like to think it's a conversation between two people making the news, people who are in the news, and those who become the news. And the whole idea is to inform, to educate, or to clarify, as the case may be. It is an art getting people to answer the questions that everyone is thinking in their minds. And that's what we try to do on 60 Minutes with Angela. I ask all the questions that everyone's thinking about and no one wants to voice. All the questions you always wanted to ask. You get those answers on 60 Minutes with Angela every week on this station. 60 Minutes with Angela, getting answers to every question you always wanted to ask. Welcome back. My concluding moments now with Yomi Badejo Okusanya. So, what do you propose as a strategy for a comeback for the People's Democratic Party? People are saying that party is dead and buried. Perhaps if the former president was still interested, you know, and be like the focal point of the party, then there would be a cohesion there. But now it looks like, you know, nothing is happening. They're all over the place. They can't even accept the fact of the reality of their loss.
In my own opinion, I think PDP needed to lose to reinvent itself. It would have been very difficult, if not impossible, for them to do it if they still had the power. I think also for continuity in this country, APC, which is the opposition, also needed to win. So that otherwise, if they didn't win, the glue that held them together would have dissolved. And then nobody would have been able to do this again, or it would have been more of an uphill task.
Yes.
Because now PDP would be a lot more alert. And so I think that for the nation, everything has worked out very well. And I also believe that for PDP to call itself a true political party, they need to taste opposition. Just like APC, to say that they're a true party, need to be in opposition and also need to be in governance.
Yes.
So now the question is that can PDP come back? I think very well. They've got a great chance. They've got a good chance. It depends on how they manage that opportunity.
Yes.
They need to go and reinvent themselves first and foremost. And what is it is that what were the founding principles of the party?
Yes.
What made the party tick? And two, how can they connect back to the people? The image we have of PDP now is that of corruption, ineptitude, poor governance, and so on and so forth. They need to address those issues.
Yes.
And they need to do them scientifically, and they need to do them strategically. The days of putting your finger in your mouth and putting it in the air and taking a decision on that is gone. They need to be a lot more scientific, which is what APC did.
Yes.
The numbers need to count. I'm not sure how much research that PDP is doing. It needs to go back to, especially its strategy and research group or team, need to redo it. They need to rejig the party. They need to reposition the party. They need to resell the party. Today it's an era of consumerism.
Yes.
The consumer is king. And, as consumers, our wants are constantly changing. So they need to identify those our wants, and they need to be able to plug in on the wants. Two, the leadership needs to be strong. Perhaps by reason of the zoning, what have you.
And when you say strong, are you saying strong financially? Because everyone now is looking at the states that are financially viable and looking to those states to perhaps lead the way in the PDP. Must it be financial muscle?
No, it must be visionary. There's a gentleman who had a vision for, and everything he said is coming out to play, and that's Dr. Kwesileze Nwodo. A lot of things that he wanted to put in place, which they fought at that time, the dominance of the governors and so on and so forth, have come now to bite. So perhaps if they had allowed Nwodo to do what he...
Those reforms,
yes, they wouldn't be where they are today. So they need to go back and look at those reforms, because you see, the governors were, for one, they're too powerful, and they were dictating the pace of what was going on, and rightly or wrongly.
Yes.
You look at a situation whereby after a governor chooses his own commissioners, he's also the one that chooses the ministers for the president. How do you want him to work? The president must be able to choose the people that can work for him. When I talk about that visionary leadership, one person that represents visionary leadership is what they're looking for.
Just one.
I believe, because that pivot can revolve around that person. I had my questions when I thought about when they were talking about the campaign organization for President Jonathan.
Yes.
And Ahmadu Ali was made the campaign. Ahmadu Ali, they were complaining about Buhari being old. I'm sure Ahmadu Ali is even much older than President Buhari.
Yes.
So they need somebody very committed, very virile, somebody who's ready to build the blocks back. Something they've got, which is very strong for them, is that they've got structure in almost every part of this country.
Yes.
And they all just need to reinvigorate that structure. Don't forget the fact that some people would not have a place in APC, no matter how much they try.
They tried, yes.
So they must pitch their tent with someone. And the next person they should pitch their tent with is with PDP.
Yes.
PDP, I've heard some of the officials saying, oh, we're not opposed to mergers, taking on new people, where Labour look like the appendage. Anyway, they can go around, they can shop. I think that if they have a clear message for Nigerians, because Nigerians have become acutely aware. I never talked about that. We never got around to that. One of the reasons why the elections were won was we shouldn't undermine or underplay the role of the electoral umpire. We had a J-led INEC that said we're going to do it right this time.
Yes.
People's votes will count. So with the card reader and so on and so forth, it changed the dynamics of elections in Nigeria. So today, you know the number of people who registered in a place.
Yes.
You know the number of people that are accredited. Then how come the number of people that voted were more
were
than
more.
the people who registered and even were accredited and so on? So I think that what has that done? It has made Nigerians very discerning. And Nigerians are watching APC and they're saying, guess what? If you don't do well, we're going to kick you out. With all the achievements, quote and unquote, of the BRF administration, they had a real struggle on their hands to get Lagos.
Yes.
Because, you know, Nigerians have become discerning and said, look, we can put things in where they belong. You know, this person will like this person, you know, for this reason will vote for this person, for that reason will not vote for this person. So you had a situation whereby in Senate, some person won the presidential, somebody else won from another party won the senatorial seat,
Yes.
and perhaps a third person won the House of Representatives. So people were able to distinguish,
choose, yes,
choose.
yes.
So I think that would come into play. That is a big factor. As long as INEC is credible and wants to make people's vote count, all PDP needs to do is to form themselves into strong opposition, a good shadow government, and address the key issues
Yes.
that we have and speak to those key issues. I think they have a great chance of coming back. It depends on how they arrange their house, what kind of leadership they have, and where they go from here.
All right. And, you know, you had cause to ask. I remember your 50th birthday some years back. You said, who manages Nigeria's image? And I thought that question is so apt now. We have a new president. There is a new perception about Nigeria out there. We've seen President Buhari on the world stage at the G7 summit with other world leaders. Do we still have any doubts about who is managing our image? Are we clear on that now?
I don't think so. And I think that it is one of the biggest assets that we have. Well, it's too early in the day to say where this government is going. But my guess is that this may quickly be swept underneath because perhaps under the carpet, because Buhari being a man of action will probably want his action to speak more than his words.
Yes.
But I think that both of them should go pari passu in the sense that we need to communicate that there's a new Nigeria. We need to communicate not just so much for the outside world,
Yes.
but for the inside world.
A new orientation.
A new orientation.
Yes.
We're already beginning to get used to this government. I remember building up to the inauguration.
Yes.
People kept on saying, this is a new government, you can't do this, you can't do that,
Yeah.
you can't do that. It's very easy for us to be complacent and go back to where we were. But we need a situation whereby it has to be strongly communicated
Yes.
that it's no longer business as usual. While there is some action going on depicting that, we should also have strong communication in that direction. It is very, very essential that we should do it. And I believe that the success of that campaign
Yes.
of managing the reputation of Nigeria will start from inside. They say charity begins at home.
Yes.
And then we can then take it out, either through the channel of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Information,
Yes.
or an amalgamated group
Yes.
of people made from various sectors of the society to take that responsibility of managing. But I think that it will be a big minus
Yes.
if we do not address it and we do not have a strategic approach to dealing with it. South Africa did it and they did it very well. When they got apartheid out of it, they had strong communication. We cannot afford to lose this opportunity.
And on a final note now, do you think that public relations is finally getting its true value in Nigeria?
Not enough, if you ask me. I don't think that we still are there.
You're doing well.
Well, thank you. I take that as a compliment, but a tree doesn't also make a forest. I need a lot of people who are like-minded.
Yes.
I need people who will aggregate thoughts and ideas. Thank God, the last national conference, the president of NIPR was one of the delegates at the
National
Confam.
Conference, yes.
You know, whatever the outcome of it, we don't know. But the fact that they recognize NIPR,
Yes.
they recognize public relations is good. But we need a lot more. Because right now, communication is at the heart of what we're doing, or should be at the heart of what we're doing.
Yes.
A lot of roles that are supposed to be traditionally that of public relations practitioners, because they have a broader spectrum
Yes.
of what is happening, are being given to media people. I don't have a problem with media people. As a matter of fact, I think that for you to be a good PR person,
You need
there
a
have
bit
to
of
be
media.
elements of, media. But public relations is strategic.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. So it's strategic communication, while media is more of reportage. Yes, it can be analysis and so on
Yes.
and so forth, but it's a deliberate, public relations is deliberately strategic. So we can map out what we think this country should be in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yes.
And we are the ones that begin to walk towards it and say, this, you can do this, you cannot do this, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. Let me give you a typical example of what I say. I've had cause to speak to the police, that the way the police is being depicted or is usually depicted in Nollywood movies is wrong.
Yes.
They should kick against it. I mean, we look at this, policemen that...
And we laugh about it.
And
but
we laugh about it.
It's serious.
It's serious. A media person may not concern himself with that. But we are saying that, look, the films, I mean, I do a lot of work across Africa, and when we talk, then they speak to me and say, oh, is it true that every move you do in Nigeria, you must go to a herbalist?
Yes, a
Where do you
baba.
get that from?
Yes.
You get that from the movies.
Yes.
So can we educate our producers that, you know, if they can't take it out totally,
Yes.
can you
Tone it down.
tone it down?
Yeah.
There's no movie that you do that the American nation is denigrated. The story is always this bad person
they
comes,
win.
he does something to
Yeah.
the nation, and then there's this hero that comes, and against all odds,
He must win.
He must win.
Yes.
That's the story. Do Americans win every time? No. But that's what they feed you. When you watch all these FBI files, and what are they telling you? They're saying that no matter how
long it takes.
the
Cold
arm
case,
of
they
the
will get you.
law will get you.
Yes.
So these things affect us psychologically. So it's only a public relations person that can put it together. We had something that we did before, and I'm going to advocate it under this regime.
Yes.
Let's have a national reputation summit.
National Reputation Summit.
To bring back all the players, or bring together all the players
Yes.
that have issues or that have one thing to do with the image of this country, the immigration, the custom, the police,
Yes.
the military, the spokespersons, and so on and so forth, the NIPR, working with the advertising people, with the marketing people. Let all of us come together and start with a reputation index for Nigeria, where every year we mark our progress in perception. You know, what does the world feel about us?
Yes.
What does London feel about doing business with Nigeria? What does New York feel about doing business with? What does Hong Kong feel about doing business with Nigeria? And so on and so forth. And then once we know where the challenges are, we begin to deliberately address those issues. So if we needed to take a road show to Hong Kong, we will. If we need to take it to Tokyo, we will. If we need to take it to London, and so on and so forth. So I'm strongly advocating. When I was in council, with due respect and sense, at the risk of being immodest, it was an idea that came to me and was given to the national body of the NIPR.
Yes.
I think we need to revisit that, and we should spearhead this in terms of managing the reputation of Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badejo Okusanya, for coming on the program.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed myself.
Thank you. And that's it for this week. I'm Angela Ajitumobi. Thank you for watching.